Good morning. In 1995, Martin Rees was named the Astronomer Royal of Great Britain. He's a preeminent cosmologist and astrophysicist, and some years ago he wrote a book that I read, and I keep going back to it. I find it so fascinating. The book's called Just 6 Numbers. They are the numbers which govern the existence of the universe. If the numbers were changed even just a hair, it's not just that we wouldn't be here, it's that there would be no universe for us to be in. There is brunch today, so I'm not going to go through all 6 numbers, but I thought I might just tackle the first 3 of them, my 3 favorite of the numbers. So the first number is N, which I know doesn't sound like a number, but trust me, it is. N is the weak atomic force. So in the nucleus of the atom, there are protons, and protons have what kind of charge? Positive charge. And what do 2 things with positive charge do? They repel each other. We're like right back to 7th grade science. This is awesome, right? So the protons want to be repelled, but the electrical force isn't the only thing going on in the nucleus. There is also gravity. Everything has mass has gravity, and the protons have gravity. So gravity wants to pull things together, and the electrical force wants to push things apart. And here's where N comes in. The force of gravity is weaker than the electrical force, and not by a little bit, not by 10 times or 100 times or 1,000 times. It is 1 undecillion times weaker. I know it sounds like I just made that up. It's an actual thing. It's a billion, 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 billion times weaker. And if it were just a little bit stronger, the universe would not exist at all. If it was just a little bit weaker, the universe as we know it would not exist. It had to be 1 undecillion times weaker. The second number is a number called lambda. Again, doesn't sound like a number, but it is. We'll get there. It was theorized by a guy named Einstein, something like that. And he said, there's stuff everywhere in the universe. Even the places where it doesn't look like there's stuff. In this room, between me and you, it looks like nothing's there. But there is, right? There's dust, and there's oxygen. In a few weeks, there'll be pollen, right? Like there's lots of stuff between us, and it's true of every square foot of the universe. We talk about the vacuum of space, but there's no such thing as a vacuum of space. There is stuff everywhere, and because there's stuff everywhere, this stuff has gravity. And Einstein said that because everything has gravity and stuff's everywhere, things should be like pulling back together. Like this piece of dust should be interacting with this piece of dust, which interacts with that piece of dust. Like there should just be a big crunch in with gravity. But there isn't. In fact, the universe is still expanding. So he says there must be some cosmological constant which counteracts the force of gravity. And he theorized it to be lambda. It was just an idea of his, but then it was discovered by experiments and scientists in the late 1990s that there is this cosmological constant. And so lambda, this force that exerts itself and counteracts gravity, here's the number. The number is 0.000000120 zeros 1. 1 to the negative 120. It is so small. It is amazing that it's not 0. But if you took one of those zeros off, the whole thing falls apart. You add 1 0 onto it, the whole thing falls apart, and we are not here. It's called the weakest force in the universe. The last one's kind of fun. It is, again, it's about expansion and contraction of the universe. You ever lay on your bed as a kid, or if you are a kid, maybe you do this now, and throw a ball at the ceiling to try and hit, like just touch the ceiling? You ever do that? Like you don't want to have it not enough force because then that's not fun. But you don't want to throw it too hard because then it bonks the ceiling and then your mom knows you're throwing balls in the house and then you're in big trouble. So you just want it to just kiss the ceiling. You know what I'm talking about? You ever do this? So in the Big Bang, if there was not enough energy, the universe would have expanded a little bit and then it would have collapsed back in on itself. But if there was too much energy and you bonked the ceiling, poof, it would have gone out too cold and nothing would have formed. It had to be just right. Here's the number. It's omega. At 1 second after the Big Bang, it had to be, the ratio of mass to energy had to be 1 to 1. 1. And I know that sounds ridiculous after 1 undecillion and 0.00001 to have just 1 as the number for omega. It also sounds like kind of like a rounding, like how many scoops of ice cream did I have last night? 1. Maybe a little more, but not too much more. But it is 1. The ratio is 1 to 1 exactly. It's so much 1 that scientists call the figure omega unity. If it was off of 1 by 1 in a quadrillion, a million billions, the whole place falls apart. What's a million billions? So if you bought a million billion sheets of paper, you had a big Staples run, okay? And the Staples order arrived, and you piled up the reams of paper. 1 quadrillion sheets of paper would reach from the Earth to a little bit past the moon. Take 1 sheet out, and it doesn't work. Add 1 sheet to it. The whole place falls apart. There's 3 more numbers, which I won't get into. I did a video a couple years ago, and I put a link to it in the bulletin. You can click on it later if you're interested in this thing. Martin Rees says that these 6 numbers are exactly what we needed them to be for existence to happen. And the probability that these 6 numbers would come in at exactly what we needed them to be is it's astronomical. It's ridiculous. Another scientist talking about this book said it would be like setting up 6 bullseyes and then grabbing 6 darts in a hand and throwing them at the wall, and all 6 darts hitting all 6 bullseyes. It's like impossible. And the amazing fact that 5 of the numbers came in would be completely negated by that last one being a little bit off, because we wouldn't be here to marvel at the fact that 5 numbers came in. All 6 numbers had to be exact. And Martin Rees, at the end of the book, says, now we have a question, did these 6 numbers just randomly happen? Somehow the cosmic dartboard worked out in our favor, or is the universe finely tuned? Did an intelligence make it so this universe can exist, and us too? And then as a good scientist, he says, but that question's not for me. That question is for the theologians and the philosophers and the people of faith and the people of prayer. That's a question for us. But that's not why I bring this up today. This isn't just Proof of God Sunday. But part of what makes me marvel about these numbers, and these 3 numbers in particular, is that they are all incredibly weak forces. You know, the force of gravity has to be 1 undecillion times weaker than the force of electricity. One force is so small, it's got 120 digits after the decimal. One figure is so exact that the whole thing teeters on one sheet of paper or not. We might like to think that our existence, that the universe's existence is like based on like raw, dynamic power, right? Like the genie in Aladdin, incredible cosmic power, itty bitty living space, right? We like to think that it's this awesome, awesome power, and yet our existence hangs not on awesome dynamic power, but on the power of weakness. Like a whisper of a butterfly's wing. And we're here. It is how the universe works. It is also how the gospel works. It's how God works. And again, we are used to thinking about God in terms of dynamic, raw power, control, force. But in our epistle lesson today, we're in the section of 1 Corinthians where Paul is waxing poetic about the weakness of God. In fact, he uses that phrase, the weakness of God. We just read it and we just like, it doesn't even register, but like think about that for a second. It like goes completely against every other concept of God. He talks about the rest of the world, Jews and Gentiles, which is a way of saying everybody else wants power and wants wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified. God created the universe not out of raw cosmic power, but by just speaking, and it was. When God chose a people, he chose a people who were slaves with no land of their own. I mean, God could have chosen the Egyptians, right? They had their act together. They had a land, they had a government, they had taxes, they had laws and rules, and they had crops. Like, they had their act together. He could have chosen them, but God chooses the nation of slaves that has nothing. God comes among us in flesh, and God doesn't like descend from the heavens as a fully grown adult with like rippling muscles as a king or as a general or something, but God comes as an infant born in a manger surrounded by the animals. There is no picture that is more vulnerable than that. This infant child, God, completely dependent on his mother and his father for everything. And then that child grows up and walks this earth and gets like dusty feet and cries and laughs and sweats. And then is nailed to the cross and dies a humiliating and terrible death. A death that was reserved for slaves and foreigners. The very picture of vulnerability and powerlessness. And yet there is the power of God. In that cross, human history is changed and the cosmos is changed and our hearts are changed, so we get up on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock and come here. It changes everything. That man on the cross. And then he says, you want to see me in this world, go and find the person who is hungry, or the person who is thirsty, or the person who is naked, the person who is sick, the person who's in prison, the person who is a stranger and doesn't belong here, and I will be in their face. He said, you want to experience me? Come and we'll put a little piece of bread in your hand that weighs like nothing, and there I will meet you. Bring a little wine, a little water, a little oil. In these simple elements, we touch holiness. And it's not that God's power is masquerading as weakness. It's not like God like just look behind the curtain and yes, okay, the power's there. It seems to be that weakness and vulnerability is where the real power is. And it's true in the universe, the very reason that we're sitting here. And it's true with God. And it's true with our faith. And if we believe it, and we don't buy in to the need to constantly defeat and take and get the bigger, better thing, it can be true in our lives too. Weakness and vulnerability is where it's at. And we only have to look at the cross to know that's true. Amen.